currently there's a debate going on all over the internet over how Paradox should allocate its growing resources when it comes to developing Europa Universalis games. This has been going on for years, but increasingly, there's this concept that has emerged that I believe has come to represent everything wrong with these games. This video is going to be discussing the various perspectives the EU4 community has on the topic, and in that discussion, I'll throw my hat into the ring as well, sharing my opinions. This video was initially intended to be a supplement to my 5-hour retrospective on EU4, so I could address things I didn't get the chance to include. Believe it or not, that video had a lot of things cut to make it more concise. If you enjoyed this sort of thing, as well as long-form multi-hour reviews of strategy games and other things, feel free to subscribe or check out my other videos. So you might already know what flavor is, but sometimes it's actually quite fuzzy to define what is flavor and what is a mechanic. For example, in EU4, the outliner is a little tab on the right side of the screen that shows you useful information and lets you interact with different mechanics. This is clearly not a flavor element. It's a piece of user interface with a purely functional purpose. On the other hand, the game opens with loading screens showing different historical figures from the game's time period. It's artwork meant to evoke the themes and the setting of the game. They have no gameplay purpose, and these are clearly flavor. In the conversation around EU4, flavor is anything in the game that has a non-gameplay purpose and instead serves to illustrate themes, setting, or other more narrative elements. The reason flavor comes up so much in the conversation around Europa Universalis 4 and now 5 is that most games don't have as much of a disconnect between their aesthetic and gameplay elements. For example, if we look at a game like Minecraft, obviously the textures and the music and the sound is all art. The way terrain is generated, the textures on blocks, but these elements are still part of a cohesive experience that can't really be separated from the game's mechanics. In most games, this is the case. You can't separate the art from the gameplay. This is not the case in strategy games. EU4's game world is mainly a map, alongside a bunch of UI elements like text, icons, and buttons, which form the primary interface for the player's actions. So when something isn't purely a utility, it actually stands out as flavor. Sometimes a flavor element can provide an important piece of information to the player, even when that is not its primary purpose. The models for units in EU4 change their outfits and weapons based on your technology level, and in some situations, you could infer a wide gap in technology between two armies simply by looking at the unit up close. But this isn't the art's primary purpose, as this information is meant to be found elsewhere, namely in the UI. You're not expected to look closely at every unit model you come up against as a way of gauging your relative strength. Seeing technology represented physically in the real world versus simply seeing it as a number in a menu provides exactly the feeling that the word flavor encapsulates. And this is undeniably a positive thing. It's good to see some feedback in the physical world. It makes the world feel more real and responsive to the complex and oftentimes pretty abstract game simulation going on in the background. Flavor becomes less obviously a purely aesthetic choice when it actually affects gameplay interactions. Like for example, variants of estates in different parts of the world. In France, you have the nobility, while in a Japanese daimyo, you get the bushi. These two estates are identical. The bushi is literally just a reskinned nobility. But in India, the nobility is called the Rajputs instead, which not only replace the nobility, but have slightly different interactions and different impacts on your country. This variation can make estates as a mechanic feel more unique to the country you're playing as, which gets to the second purpose of flavor: customizability, variety, and specificity. Clearly, flavor serves a purpose, so why did I just make a whole video talking about why it's a problem? Well, because a lot of the community seems to have their priorities wrong about how much effort should be placed on flavor content versus actual mechanics and game systems. To explain this, we should probably start with missions. In the past 5 years, I've seen a lot of discussion online about missions. Missions in EU4 used to be small, generic tasks. Simple stuff you could do for a bit of prestige or some other minor bonus. Each mission has a requirement you need to meet, and once you do, you click a button and get some kind of reward. Nowadays, they're usually linked together in a chain, so you're following a kind of narrative path, sometimes even with branching choices that let you steer your campaign in different directions. At this late stage in EU4's life, Missions have become the main way most players experience their country's story and their wider strategy. At least part of the reason for this is that mission rewards are often insanely powerful, and they've taken the center stage in recent DLCs. This system has simply gone too far. The rewards are now so insanely overpowered that they make players follow the same path every game, removing the sense of improvisation and creativity that makes EU4 special. Because missions are static and tied to specific countries and paid expansions, they create a rigid, formulaic experience and disincentivize playing less popular or smaller nations. I also mentioned in that video how missions flatten the game's potential as a dynamic sandbox and replace organic gameplay with repetitive, developer-scripted gratification. A lot of people, and let's be honest, a lot of new players, enjoy missions as a way of creating some narrative structure and built-in goals and rewards to supplement EU4's otherwise pretty wide-open sandbox-style gameplay. Thankfully, the question of missions seems to be up for debate again in the development of EU5. And wow, yeah, it's a pretty heated debate by Europa Universalis forum standards. For years, people have complained about this or that country not getting unique enough missions, or not having enough missions period, with the argument being that they just get bored of their game when they run out of missions to accomplish. Though these posts are usually in favor of missions and demand more missions all the time, these complaints honestly demonstrate everything that's wrong with missions and the negative impact they have on gameplay. Personally, I think that EU4 would literally have been better if we threw missions out completely. But since people like getting their little dopamine hit for completing an arbitrary task, rather than playing based on a wider strategy and creating their own goals, let's assume we can all compromise. There's this argument thrown around that because the community likes something, that means it's good or should remain in these games. People like Candy Crush, people like Subway Surfers. Should we just add those mechanics in as well? It's an extreme example, but the point is that this game should have a core experience that the mechanics enhance. And as it stands, EU4 missions are invalidating other game systems. If Paradox wants to make a game where static goals lead to static rewards, and you just do that over and over and over again until you run out of content from your hundreds of dollars worth of DLCs, that's fine, but I won't be playing it. What I love about these games is their complexity and their openness to a wide variety of playstyles, a wide variety of goals, and a wide variety of outcomes. Without these elements, I don't want to play a Europa Universalis game. To be more pragmatic though, I would like at a minimum to be able to ignore missions without feeling entirely suboptimal, and at a maximum, if people really need a button to click, I'd prefer it was dynamic and responsive to your situation, even if that makes missions more generic. So it turns out that the Europa Universalis forums have a term for people like me. I'm a simulationist. I actually found this out while making this video. As you can probably tell, I view Europa Universalis as a simulation, and I think that its gameplay should be as dynamic and emergent as possible without being limited arbitrarily by, well, anything. The fact that you can form other countries as basically any country in the world through various mechanical shenanigans, adopt religions that wouldn't normally apply, and do all of this to create a unique country that took both effort and planning to pull off, that's amazing to me. To me, that's EU4. But a lot of players, and again, especially newer players, enjoy role-playing as a specific country and, I don't know, I guess doing what they think that country would have done historically. There's a sense of reenacting history here, but it's never quite right since the game will always be a dynamic simulation of abstract events. Things never play out like they did in the real world, and that's kind of the whole point. So role-playing, to me, seems to have less to do with historical reenactment and more to do with adopting a kind of identity to create a real feeling alternate history where you shape that country's fate. If this sounds like just playing the game normally, I have to admit I don't really understand what role-playing is at a deep level or why it's appealing. Sure, I can understand taking religious ideas because you want to play as Spain and pretend that you're super Catholic, but then what? To me, this might provide some motivation for your actions in the game, but it isn't the game itself. Roleplay is something for players to create in their minds, and I don't see why superfluous flavor elements would assist with that any more than a rich mechanical system. Now we get to a slightly different topic. Some people argue that Europa Universalis should be a representation of history rather than a simulation of alternate history. In this vein, people argue that missions and other flavor, like events, are important for maintaining historical accuracy. This argument is wild to me. I don't understand why people insist on historical accuracy when the whole point of this game is its varied and simulated world. No two campaigns are the same, and I just don't understand the point of trying to make anything that happens after the game starts more historically accurate, because it never will be. It's funny because a lot of the same people who complain about historical accuracy, at least in my YouTube comments, tend to be the ones defending Eurocentrism in these games. When I point out how EU4 is historically inaccurate, exactly because it makes Europe way more powerful than it should be in 1444, I either get people telling me I'm wrong, which, okay, or I get people telling me it's just a game, that it doesn't need to be perfectly accurate. And the real kicker is when I get people telling me that it wouldn't be fun unless Europe was overpowered in the game. I don't know why some people like to pit historical accuracy against fun, or on the flip side, argue that historical accuracy is more fun. I see Europa Universalis as a simulation. So to me, historical accuracy is just like the starting condition of the simulation. If people want it to be accurate, I have no issue with that, although I don't see what fun has to do with it. Once you press play, accuracy is going out the window. Events and missions are abstract concepts that are meant to be more like callbacks to historical events, references, not actual representations of them. Events, mechanically speaking, are literally just random pop-ups with a choice or a mechanical result. The flavor is the text above the choice. It's not the existence of the choice. Like, yes, these choices are designed to represent history, but I guess I just don't see what flavor advocates feel is lacking here. Do you think that more accurate historical events will help with the roleplay or fun? Are events really even fun in EU4? I like events because they force me to make a choice and be in a more reactive stance rather than constantly being in control of everything that happens to my country. But I wouldn't say that events are fun per se. I think the biggest reason why I ignore the flavor text here is that it's literally irrelevant to the actual game. The game is the numbers and the map and the units, and in the case of the events, it's just the outcome. It's not this text above the outcome that will have no impact on anything ever again. And again, I get that some people might like this text, that they might get some narrative value from reading these, but to me, that narrative experience is not valuable enough to prioritize. EU4 is a game that shines in its emergent gameplay narratives, not static written narratives. I just think that there are other games, and frankly other media, that would be better suited to feeling immersed in a story through text. Like, I don't know, a history book or a story-based game, or even maybe Crusader Kings. So throughout this video, I've been pitting flavor against actual gameplay, and this might feel like an unfair dichotomy to some people. Why is it one versus the other? Can't we have both? And when I set up the argument this way, of course it benefits my side. I'm positioning myself as on the side of gameplay, and it's kind of strawmanning the flavor advocates as wanting to play dress up with superfluous content. So let's quickly address this because I actually think that's a very fair question. The way I see it, it's one thing to simply add flavor to a mechanically rich game. That's great. Every game needs some superfluous stuff to add to its aesthetic, and I'm never going to be denying that. That's where we get the theme, the vibes, and partly the feeling of a cohesive experience. But a big issue that made me start to complain more and more about this is that Paradox loves to sell us flavor for money. Content pack DLC microtransaction practices are blatant cash grabs that, at best, take away at least some of the development time from things that actually matter in the game, and at worst, replace the real mechanical improvements that would have been made through DLCs and create bloated, featureless products. Like, look at this one, Europa Universalis 4 Ultimate Sprite Pack. We're looking at $30 base price. And what does it add? This pack includes 28 separate packs, to add greater cultural and historical fidelity to the appearance of military sprites, as well as other attractive visual content on the map. what are we actually looking at here? New units, ship designs for Indian and Muslim nations, cavalry models, portraits for advisors. I mean, what are we talking about right now? This is for $30, and this is a bundle, right? The base price of each of these packs was probably around $5 to $10 each, and look how many there are. And look at this one, EU4 Golden Century Immersion Pack, 434 mostly negative reviews. This came out in 2018, and it's $10 base price. Added unique infantry units, ship models, some music. Here it is. New missions and objectives. And believe it or not, I actually think that games do deserve to make money on these things if people are willing to buy them. I mean, why not? Artists are not the same people as the designers and programmers, so in theory, the artists could keep plugging away at adding new flavor assets without taking away from the development resources. But in reality, the other teams will still have to implement these assets, define the product that they'll be bundled into, test them, and market them. And all of that takes a lot of work for something that amounts to reskinned little dudes that are so small I don't look at them anyway. And the worst part of this is people actually ask for more of this stuff. And if you care about these little guys and what they look like, I mean, genuine question, why are you playing EU4? This is not to be mean or exclude people. It seems to me that this game is not the game for you. There are other games where customizing units is a core part of the experience, like Total War or like Mountain Blade or something. So genuinely, if you care about this stuff, I would love to hear from you. But in general, this is why flavor has come to rub me the wrong way. It feels like a catch-all term to represent a turn away from the mechanically rich, system-based gameplay and toward a more static, content-focused design. But it's worth quickly noting that good flavor does exist and can even have enough value to be sold as a DLC. Personally, I think music is a great example of positive flavor. Music is an element that adds so much to a gameplay experience without directly affecting gameplay, and EU4's music packs make sense as DLCs, well, because you're purchasing music. I of course never bought the music packs, but I'm not offended that they exist. I think musicians should be rewarded for their art. And in general, this kind of flavor is great, especially when the music is adaptive to your situation in the game, but even if it's just static, I mean, you're buying music. I think another really interesting and honestly super minor example is how province names dynamically adapt to their owner's culture in EU4. This is such a small thing that actually, I think, goes a long way to making the space feel more real and responsive to your actions. The same goes for the names of characters being based on culture. I mean, that's technically flavor as well. Your generals and your kings, your advisors, their names are just flavor, they don't matter. But do you see how these things are fundamentally different from something like selling events or overpowered missions as DLC? Music and adaptive names aren't a drip feed of content slop that bloats the game or invalidates other mechanics. They are actual enhancements to the experience. They add value, they add flavor. And by the way, of course, the adaptive names thing is not in any DLCs as far as I know. That was in the base game. If I had to summarize my position in just one sentence, it would be that Paradox should do what it feels is right to develop a cohesive experience without any outlying mechanics that undermine other systems in the game. To me, this cohesive experience should be focused on simulating a complex world and providing interesting choices for players to interact with these systems. Pretty much everything else, from my perspective, is a distraction from this core vision, including community members asking for mechanics that don't fit this vision. But you might notice that I haven't been talking at all about the mechanics shown in EU5 in this video. And that's because honestly, I don't think they matter much until the game is actually out. I don't want to comment on stuff that's in development because, as we know, Paradox games go through a lot of iteration even after release. So to me, it just seems pointless to address upcoming mechanics that might not even be in the actual game. And believe it or not, if Paradox decides to go in a new direction with EU5, that's fine with me, as long as its new vision is internally consistent. No matter what happens when that time comes, you know I'll be reviewing the game in excessive detail. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I'm currently working on a multi-hour review of Civilization 5, Part 1 is already out, so you can check that out. Or if you haven't seen my 5-hour review of EU4, that's always there.